What is up, everybody? And I mean everybody. Um, Checking my sound real quick just to make sure. Just wanted to do a quick stream. Nothing too long, nothing to hold you guys forever. I've got my nice shadow here keeping me company. While my son plays some VR over here on the side. Things are good. Life is good. And we have a show to talk about, at least for a little while, as I prep for Tuesday night with Matthew Matson. And definitely want to kind of get things kicked off. But I don't want to go over this entire show, but I just want to say how fun this episode was, how fun episode 4 was. Um, Man, oh man. Like, you talk about, man, you talk about some action finally after 3 episodes of no action, of no nothing really happening for those of you who crave the action, who crave the excitement that we got in Game of Thrones. Um, we finally saw some dragons, right? Finally saw some dragons happening. And so, with that being said, I just want to kind of get into episode 4, talk about it for just a little while, and then pop off. But man, I'll tell you, I love going live. I love talking. I love talking to y'all. And if you feel like popping in at any moment, then throw a comment in or whatever. Watch it on replay. Throw me a like or a subscribe. Although most of you here probably have subscribed already. Trying to grow the channel as best I can, and as I navigate these YouTube waters, so to speak. It's we'll see what happens, man. It's a wonderful journey, and honestly, it's just a great new hobby. And if it's a great new hobby, I can turn it into maybe a great new passion and a great new way to make some extra income. But honestly, when it comes down to it, I just like being on camera and I like talking. And there's no better way to do that than this, especially in a long form format. 3-star draw, who is here, which, man, you need to be making your video. So why are you showing up here? And I wouldn't blame you one bit, man. You got work to do. You got work to do tomorrow. You've had a long weekend, a good weekend, hanging out on your property and at your camper. And it was so much fun for you to hang out last night and me hang out on a Punk with Toys stream. I love that Punk's Pit, just that free form kind of thing where everybody cuts up and has a good time. And 3-star draw says, yes, I did not watch it. Didn't watch it yet, fool. Well, in that case, I'm not going to get too crazy into spoilers. I know I put that in the title, but I'm really not going to get too crazy into spoilers. I just want to talk a little bit about how the differences between a show like this and a show like The Acolyte, a show like a lot of other things that we've watched. And I just wanted to get into it for just a little bit before I jump off. There are some other streams that are doing a much more deep dive breakdown into this show and a far better job with other people who are really tuned in than I could do by myself. Tuesday night at 10 Eastern, 9 Central. I will get into these things with Matthew Matson, and we're going to do a deep dive over the show. So hopefully in 2 days, you will have watched it. You will have maybe watched it again. There are some differences from the books to this one. Um, I will say that there are the differences between the books and TV. We've seen it for years. Producers, showrunners will take liberties, but I understand why. I understand why from a context of what makes good TV. What makes a good book doesn't necessarily make good TV. And yes, when you read a book and it's you use your imagination. It's so descriptive. You're able to really dive in, and you when you it's amazing. Your imagination is really a truly amazing thing. Like it really is, because we probably, I don't even know what the great word or phrase is for it, but because we have so much television now, because we have so many things getting adapted now, we're able to see the things we've always loved realized in front of us in with CGI the way it is, with the budgets the way they are. Because I remember a time back in the 70s with a Spider-Man show on network television. And while there were probably aspects of it that were okay, I just remember the fact that realistically, you couldn't really do a lot of the things with a Spider-Man live action network television show that you could do now with a live action network television show. I also think that when it comes to movies and TV shows, obviously, again, like I said, the budgets are so high that there's things you can do where these things seem more realized than ever before. And so while a lot of that is great because we can see it, we can, it's tangible, right? The scenes we've read in books or conversations or battle scenes or whatever it is, we've seen in books, we've only been able to imagine in our own eyes. Now we can see those things played out in front of us. And for a lot of them, especially for years, that was awesome. But in the early days, it wasn't so awesome because, you didn't have properly trained fighting scenes. I mean, think about the early scenes of our Star Wars, the original trilogy, and think about how those scenes were metered out and directed and talked about, and you had your lightsabers and stuff like that. But I remember an article and a live piece from Mark Hamill talking about how George Lucas back in the day wanted the lightsabers to seem like they were really heavy. Like they were just extremely, even though they were beams of light or plasma or whatever you want to say, they were really heavy. And so if you look back at the original trilogy, they always had two hands on the lightsaber, kind of like my ex-girlfriend. But in the prequel trilogy, he actually made it more like they were more free flowing and they were able to use them. And obviously, Anakin was a master at being able to use his lightsaber and, I mean, there's even deleted scenes where he swings it and then kind of gets blocked and he drops it down to his other hand and grabs it behind his back. And I remember Mark Hamill getting kind of pissed off about that, talking about, man, George, he told us these things were as heavy as sledgehammers. And when we wanted to swing them, they had to be there was so much weight. And if you watch those original trilogy movies, you see that. You could see the direction that George had given the actors, that it was, man, they're so heavy that to swing one, it has to use all your strength. Whereas in the prequel movies, you saw them very, very fluidly, spinning around, doing maneuvers, and then obviously in the animation and there, so on and there forth, you saw where lightsabers became, yeah, they were light sabers, not heavy sabers. And so what I mean by that, to just bring that around, is like from a choreography standpoint, you see things progress. So from back in those days in the 70s and into the 80s and 90s and whatever, you see the way action scenes are shot, the way they progress, the way they change. And so to where we are now. Now, by no means am I saying that the action scenes in this show are just bar none the best it's ever done or whatever. However, I will say that they are really fluid and very good, and um, the way that things are shot now just seem to be on such a level that we can realize them in front of us rather than just having to use our imagination. Now, using our imagination from the books, which I have not read, so I'm only taking excerpts and things that I have understood from the books, to this show, House of the Dragon, there are going to be some discrepancies and maybe some lore changes, or maybe not lore changes, but some discrepancies in how battles and things were done or how they ended up. And this episode actually has one of those changes. As a matter of fact, it's not a tiny change. It's actually a pretty decent sized change. Three-star draw also well, you're also getting popular. They talked about you on Oz's Clubhouse last night too. I listen, I appreciate that. That's great. I really do. Any kind of support, as a human being, any kind of support that you can have is always wonderful. And so, if that was the case, man, I'll have to go back and check that out. But that's wonderful, and I appreciate that from anybody who participated in that conversation, to say the least. However, um, I didn't want to get too of a much of a deep dive in this episode, but I did want to talk about a little bit the fact that I think now, for those who are wanting action, that are wanting battles, we're now getting into it. It took us a little while, but here we are. Now, what I do think what makes House of the Dragon and Game of Thrones so special is that I feel like it's all about the conversations, and it's all about the political intrigue. So when it comes down to it, the conversations, the political intrigue, the behind the back, all of that stuff really is what these books and these shows are all about. Yes, they have the battles, they have the dragons and everything. But at the end of the day, I really do feel like it's mostly what's leading up to that. And we've seen some of the master of whisperers, so to speak, working his magic not only with the king but with the king's uh, mother, Allison, Queen Allison, the Dowager. We see even within Rhaenyra's own council, they're growing restless. Last episode, not to give too much away, and I'll try not to. Last episode, she disappeared for a little while and did not give any reference as to where she went. So you can imagine a council sitting there trying to figure out what is going on. Where is our queen? We've got armies marching on, taking over territories, taking castles, taking houses, and our queen is non-existent. She's absent. And so on one side with the blacks, you have their queen who's absent. On the greens, you have their queen who is absent, so to speak, from the council meetings, but that's because she's dealing with another problem, a personal problem. We see Aegon the second, who is the current king for the Greens. He is in the meetings. He is there. He is present. However, he's basically getting usurped by his own brother, his own followers. So we see some things happening, some things in motion. And if you're familiar with the books at all, then you know these things kind of happen. However, they did make some changes, and some of those are kind of major changes from books to the show. Again, we will get into those Tuesday night with Matthew Matson on our stream, The Big Show, 10 Eastern, 9 Central on Tuesday night. But I just kind of wanted to lay the groundwork tonight a little bit and just kind of go over it and see if A, anybody's watching the show. B, I could just get a decent recording out there and have something to chop up a little bit. And then let's see. And Three-Star Draw says I'll have it watched by Tuesday. And I think most people will. If you care about a show enough, if you care about a current show that is popular, that is happening, if you care about it enough, chances are after 48 hours, you've probably watched it. And if it goes any longer than that, then really the guidelines when it comes to spoilers and stuff is probably about 48 to 72 hours. Because after that, everything is kind of fair game. And it's not that it's a bad thing. It's anybody's, out for you to not know what's going on. It's just that when it's a popular show, people watch it, they dig into it, they start watching other videos. If that's their life, if they're on YouTube or they watch YouTube, and they start to parse out those theories, they start to contrast and compare between the books and the show and all that stuff. So tonight I don't want to get into too many spoilers, if any, but I do want to at least lay the groundwork for Tuesday and talk about those things in depth on Tuesday night. It may very well take our entire stream. And if you're okay with that, I'm okay with that. And if you're not okay with that, then really, honestly, unless some other news pops up out of the blue in the next few days, I'm not really worried about it. So this episode really starts out with Damon, and Damon has taken Harrenhal, and it's not going so well. Now, I'm not saying it's not going so well as far as resistance or anything like that. It's just not going so well for him. It's also a very lonely place. As Laris says in this episode, that it's the castle's more crippled than he is. And that's very true. Once you see it, you'll understand what that line means and where it comes from. And it is very true that, Harrenhal, which is, at Storm's End. Well, Storm's End means that, like, there's no end to the storms. It's a cursed castle. It has storms all the time. They never end. And that can play mind games and tricks on, people's minds. And we see it in this episode. We saw it last episode. So we see it in this episode. We go from Matt Smith's character, Damon, kind of seeing things or whatever, to being alerted that there are castles that have both fallen. And then he has a supporter. And that supporter is Lord Grover. And Lord Grover is with the Blackwoods, the Lord Paramount of the Riverlands, as it seems. And so it's Oscar Tully, my bad. Oscar Tully. He shows up. And he's a grandson to Grover Tully. And he is basically there he's been summoned by Damon. And then you kind of get a scene where, Damon, you can tell, is really out of sorts. He hasn't been sleeping well. And you understand that he's trying to raise an army, and yet at the same time, he's really not trying to raise an army. If he wanted to raise an army, he'd just go out with his dragon, right? He'd go out with his dragon. He would get some houses to his cause, and that would be that. But instead, he's basically MIA. He's MIA. He's taken over this castle without resistance, but who cares? Because there's no one there. So it's either Damon is trying to forge his own path, or he's feeling guilty, or he doesn't quite know what to do. There's a weirwood tree in a courtyard. Obviously, there's a past to this place, and it speaks to him. He is not really able to speak too much to it, at the very least, it seems, and he's having weird dreams. And so that really sets up, moving forward, that to me, Damon is alone. And again, we'll get into that heavily on Tuesday. In the meantime, you have Rhaenys, who is sister to Viserys, who passed away last season. Rhaenys got passed over for the crown. She goes to visit her husband, and she runs into someone very close to both of them, really, but one of them in particular. Someone who should be celebrated. Someone who should be celebrated rather than pushed to the background. But if you know anything about this world, the bastards are pushed to the background, and no matter how good or bad they are, and no matter how good or bad the real bloodlines are, they are usually promoted. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how good or person they are, bad or person they are, whatever. And then we see that Alicent is having some issues as well, of her own personal issues from some of the things she's done. And she asked one of the maesters one of the council rather, his opinion on maybe relationships, on her father, or not her father, her former husband, who was Rhaenyra's father, so King Viserys. So Alicent's former husband, she wants to know a little bit of information, and she's not giving what she wants to hear. But at the same time, I think she is giving what she wants to hear. There's a scene where it seems that she drinks something that is supposed to be for a friend. However, truthfully, it is for her, and Laris knows that it's for her. Kristen Cole decides we've got to hide in the trees, take tree cover, move at night. So we have Rhaenyra's camp on Dragonstone trying to figure out where to go, what to do. And so we get a couple scenes there, which is also Luke, who's trying to figure out, what to do about fighting. And, we know that last episode, Rhaenyra disappeared for a little while, and there's a reason why she disappeared. She went to King's Landing. I'm not going to go too much more into it than that, other than to say that that did not go the way she wanted it to. However, it was a good scene last week. It was a great way to kind of culminate the episode. I do think it was a bit of a stretch, the way it was handled. But ultimately, you see the machinations, you see what was trying to take place. So she comes back, and in her stead, the council has been bickering, trying to figure out what to do. They're kind of pissed off because no one's in charge. And yes, that's true. No one really is in charge, and Daemon is nowhere to be found. Right? He, is the husband to the queen. Not really a king, so to speak. Right? He's a prince, so to speak. But nonetheless, they've tried to get contact with him. He won't respond. He has visions and things of that nature. And so they decide, hey, we need to send someone out. We have the armies marching. They have taken over a couple castles and houses. They've killed people who won't bend the knee. And so at this point, we need dragons. We need to unleash some dragons. We need something to happen. And so really this episode, when it's all said and done, there's a few things this episode about. Number one, we finally get to see some dragon on dragon action, which sounds really hot. We get to see Aegon make a decision for himself rather than all his decisions being made for him. And we see the consequences of that decision, but not really. We see what we think are the consequences of that action, but we don't really know yet. We also see Sir Kristen Cole, who is starting to maybe understand that, his personal mission is not as what he thinks that it is, or maybe he will be emboldened by his latest decision. However, I think his latest decision was rooted in good spirits. However, things happened that kind of got in the way or got in the middle of that he did not expect, nor do I think he will be blamed for it as well. I think it's just the desires of one person in the realm who just really doesn't want to be on the sidelines. And then it's not that we got great battle scenes per se in this episode, but we did get at least some more action. We got some kind of action, because that's something we've been lacking, is action. And while I don't mind myself, and really personally think the political intrigue is the most interesting aspect of the show, and was really the most interesting aspect of Game of Thrones. Sorry. At the end of the day, you still need something to drive the plot forward, and all you have is political intrigue, great dialogue, mind you, but political intrigue sandwiched between a couple scenes here or there. I don't think that's enough to satiate the viewers. We really need more. We need a lot of dialogue, good dialogue between different houses, between the individuals on the court of each appointed king or queen. And so we're just now really digging into the meat of that stuff. Feels like a really good ham and Swiss with on like rye, or like a pastrami and yellow mustard, spicy mustard, on rye bread, just a good meaty sandwich you can dig your teeth into. We're finally starting to get that. I think last season was really wonderful from top to bottom. I think this season's been a little uneven so far. And I think a lot of times that has to do with the fact that we only have so many episodes, right? We only have 6, we only have 8 or whatever it was. And I'll never forget when the writer's strike happened back in like 2005-ish or so, somewhere in there, 2005, 2006, 2004. I remember every episode of television, for the most part, was about 24 episodes. And when it came to HBO and stuff like that, it's always been consistent. It's always been about 10 episodes, 12 episodes, 8 episodes, somewhere in there, 8, 10, 12, roughly. And since then, the norm has become the 8, 10, 12, especially now that everything is streaming. But some shows are able to do it well. They're able to cram a lot of stuff into, let's say, 8 episodes. They're able to make each one of those really good. Maybe you have an episode of filler. And what we call filler is an episode that has mostly just dialogue and no action. Now, for shows that are based around things that aren't just action, then it works out great. But for shows that are based around action, so to speak, and action scenes, then it's difficult sometimes for showrunners to pull that stuff together, give it interesting enough plot lines, interesting enough characters to carry a show for 8 episodes at an hour a piece, 49 minutes a piece, whatever it is, and really make it worth somebody's time watching. However, conversely, in the network television world, I feel like having the classic 24-minute episode with commercial breaks and the formula that they have, when you break that formula, I think it's actually hurt network television as a whole. I don't know that you need data. I just think ultimately you need to be able to see it for yourself, and critics be able to see that, and they have. So if this show, let's say if The Acolyte was like 22 episodes, I think it would be canceled. It would have been canceled after 6, 8 at the most. Network would have said, hey, we're not going to make any money off of this. With things now being in a shorter time span, being put into a an 8 episode, 10 episode arc, 6 episode arc, whatever it is, I think you're at least seeing some people stick around to watch it, but it's still not that good. But they'll still stick around to watch it just because they know it's not a 5-week investment, or not even 5 weeks. Let's say if they jam it all and just release it all and you can watch it at one time, the show gets a little bit of traction for the first couple weeks, but after that it dies off. Even with shows that are actually good, is that unless they are really good, really, really good, they lose traction after just a few weeks. And so at least this show, with the way it's set up, being on HBO, so it has the leash taken off, right? Then they're able to explore some things and do some things that you wouldn't be able to get on a lot of network television. And so for that, I'm glad. And really, it's followed the same formula as everything else. House of the Dragon has followed the same formula as most every other HBO series, and in these in particular. So nonetheless, really with this episode, we get some more setup between houses. We get a couple of houses that have fought for a really long time, continue to fight. We get Rhaenys kind of seeing or discovering someone of relation, so to speak. We get Alicent's brother. Let's see here if I can find him here. Share this picture, although I don't want to get dinged by definitely don't want to get dinged by YouTube, or anybody else for that matter. But ultimately, at the end of the day, this episode really starts to get into the battles. We see dragons fighting. We get a good 2-on-1 dragon battle. It's really good, and we've been waiting for that. Last season, we at the very end of the season, and really the couple episodes leading up, we got some dragons. It was awesome, and then now we get to see them in flight, and we get to see them actually pulling no punches. And again, this is relatives against relatives, right? This isn't just one house against another house that doesn't know each other. This is, blood relatives. These are people that know each other well, and we're family now getting into it. So we start to see the damage from that. And I think it's really, really good. It looked really good. The CGI looked really good. Bobby Wold hopped in real quick and says, I have not watched any of this series yet because the last season of Game of Thrones, I know my wife loves it. Bobby, I can tell you that, man, I feel you, dude. I was so excited about finishing up Game of Thrones, and the last 2 seasons at least really just soured everybody on that. Just soured them. The writing was shit. The time frames were shit. They sped a lot of things up. They warped to places. They sent ravens that got there in like 5 minutes. Things that just should not have happened. And they got to the point where the showrunners probably got to where they didn't want to work on it anymore. They were done. They had gotten a huge contract from Disney, I believe. Maybe not quite at that time yet, but they were given a whole bunch of money, and nothing ever came about of that. All the money they were given, right? Tens of millions of dollars. Nothing ever came of that for Disney. But they were also at the same time doing HBO, and they were doing Game of Thrones, and just blew through the last couple seasons. And ultimately, I think at the end of the day, it's the fact that they didn't have any source material. And when you run out of source material, you're either a really good writer, or you talk to the source, even though that source has not written the books, at least past a certain point. You talk to that source, you get the information, and you craft what you can out of it. And they just did not do a great job of that at the end of Game of Thrones. And it's such a shame, too, because for such a wonderful, really well written and crafted series to go out the way that it went out, and for everyone that was involved, other than the actors, actually, for everyone involved to just kind of put their head in the sand and just say, "Oh no, what are you talking about? It was really good. It was so much fun." And then you see the interviews with the actors, and they're just kind of like, yeah, some of the best TV I ever watched in my life." Knowing they're joking, knowing they're messing around. Um, it really did a lot of damage, and so it caused a lot of people to not want to tune into the show. Me being one of them. Now, there were people I trust who were doing episode by episode reviews. There were people I trust who were telling me, no, actually, this acting was really good. Matt Smith is really good. Like, the people they've hired are actually doing a great job with these characters. Yes, there are issues. Yes, there are problems. But when it's all said and done, um, they actually did a really good job with it. Better than I honestly thought they would. And so I'm with it till the end, right? I'm stuck with it till the end. And I wouldn't even call it stuck at this point. I'd say I'm good with it. Like, I like it. I really do. And I think it's interesting. Bobby Wold also says all those seasons building up to the war with the White Walkers, and they got it done in one episode. Yes. Yeah, definitely the battle in the north and everything that went down. How it went down and how it ended, and then Arya and everything with her, and you have the prince that was promised and all that stuff, but yet you end up with someone who is crippled on the throne and did not actually do what was needed to be done, but it fell to his sister, and it seemed very contrived. And again, they didn't have the source material, or at least they were told maybe somewhat a pseudo ending, but not the true ending. So if they deviate from that too much, then maybe they come off looking as if they decided to change things really crazily. I don't know. I don't know that we'll ever know the true story behind that unless George R. Martin goes back and finishes those books himself, which I think he's getting too old to do. And I don't think he's going to pass it down to anybody else. And I think we're going to be left with what would be considered widely as the greatest story to have no ending. I just do. It is what it is, and look, that's okay. If that's what happens, that's okay. Bobby also says if any often twice if anyone wanted to leave the Game of Thrones, just pull up Paula Deen. Trust me, they won't ask you back. Paula Deen, yeah, it's just this show is a breath of fresh air knowing we got burned by the last couple seasons, 3 seasons of Game of Thrones, knowing we got burned by that. This show is a breath of fresh air. I was concerned at first. It's turned out to be really good. I enjoy it. I recommend it. I highly recommend it. Uh, Again, it's about the intrigue, the back behind the scenes, the conversations. It's the dialogue. And when you have good writers who can write good dialogue for your actors, it can completely transform a show. And I think that in this case, it has taken a show and really made it very good based off the writers. Now, the book themselves that it's taken from has unreliable narrators. You can have different points of view. And so when you do that, you don't necessarily have to fit it within this box all nice and neat and tie a bow on it because it's from unreliable sources who talk about it from their perspective. And I think that helps them out in a lot of ways. Um, I was not a fan again of the way that it ended. But when you run out of book material, if you run that stuff by the creator of the books before you make it, at that point, George R. Martin is just as culpable as David and Dan. Benioff and Weiss, they're just as culpable, or vice versa. That George R. is just as culpable for the ending of that show. They could have made it the most amazing number one show ever of all time in the history of mankind. And unfortunately, the last season and a half or so, at least, knocked it off of that perch. And it was there for the taking. It was a gold medal. All they had to do was crawl across the line. And they fell flat on their faces the last 2 seasons. Let's see here. And yes, Bobby, if Benioff and Weiss worked out from Game of Thrones so bad, they should have just pulled instead of writing bad episodes, they wouldn't ask them back. Yeah. Well, we got what we got. And this show is actually doing a great job of erasing those memories. So nonetheless, as this show kind of went on, for this episode rather, we have council meetings that are kind of butting up against each other. We have Daemon at Harrenhal. We have Aemon, who is wanting to get into action. Aemon has Rhaegar, he's wanting to get into action. He's got the biggest dragon in the land. He just wants something to do. Because he knows how badass he is. He knows how badass that dragon is. And so he finally does get in the action. I'm not going to describe it or tell you what happens, but I will say also that Alicent is trying to figure out, because based off of last episode, what she believes, what she doesn't believe. She's trying to either convince someone of what she believes or what she was told, but she's also resigned to the fact that there's nothing she can do. And from that point, it's a situation where, as much as she would love to do something about what's going on, then as bad as she wants to do something about it, she can't. She can't do anything about it. The wheels are set in motion. It is a done deal. And then Daemon is at Harrenhal. He's having issues. Harrenhal is a very lonely place. It's a sack castle. It's Storm's End. It's nonstop storms. It's raining. The ceilings are leaking. And I think from a psychological aspect, it's just one of those terrible places that you could be. And he's kind of waiting this thing out at the moment, right? Because he's not in the action. He's not at Rhaenyra's side. He's not on Dragonstone. He just took off because he got pissed off because he's a selfish son of a bitch. And he's pissed that his brother, his brother loved other people just than him. But if you understand his background, he was not always around. He came and he went. He wasn't always there to support his brother. He was kind of an asshole. And so it only makes sense. But now Daemon is wanting, obviously, to blame everybody else, even the people he's trying to pick up for his cause, for Rhaenyra's cause. But then there's questions about whether or not he wants it to be his cause. Is it his cause? Is it Rhaenyra's, his wife's, who is actually also his niece? Is it, whose cause is it for him? And he's grappling with all those things in the moment. But in reality, it's like he's on his side. And that's really truthfully all it is. He's on his side. And so, we get a few more updates. He's bringing in, other lords. He's trying to figure out, hey, how can we raise an army? Well, he should have already been raising an army. That's the sad part about it. He's been gone. He's gone to Harrenhal. He took it easily. No one put up any resistance, right? So he's got this gigantic castle, but it's a cursed castle, and he has done nothing while he's been there except for sleep and have nightmares. That's it. So as Tyrion said in House of or Game of Thrones, he drinks and he knows things. Well, Daemon, on the other end, he drinks and doesn't know anything. As a matter of fact, he sleeps and doesn't know things. That's basically it. Everything comes to him in a dream. It's but anyway, so we also see a scene where Rhaenys and her husband come together, the sea snake, and everyone's trying to figure out what's going on. Rhaenyra's been absent. She comes back. She kind of tells them all, hey, ready to have some action, ready to do something. And this kind of somewhat sets into motion things that can't be changed. Rhaenys goes off to battle. And we see Aegon, who is struggling with not doing anything. He is the king, but everybody's plotting behind his back. So he can't do anything, and yet he decides, I'm going to get into action after a few drinks of wine, several cups, after his mother comes to talk to him, and he decides, I am going to do something about it. And that pretty much sets into motion the rest of the episode. And I think the rest of the episode, from about, I'd say from 30 minutes out or so, become the most interesting, especially when it comes to battles so far. So 30 minutes out of the episode before it's over, and really, with credits, probably 27 or 23 minutes, right? If I have 7 minutes of credit, I have not watched the stinger for next week. I don't know, but I will say this: so far, this episode has decided to spring things into action. Here we are. We're getting ready. We got some dragon battles. Yes, there are people that suffer consequences, and there are people who should suffer consequences that don't. There, things have been changed from the book, and we'll find those things out. We'll find them out next week. Obviously, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody that hasn't seen it. So I'm going to give you guys probably a couple days. And then Tuesday night with Matthew Matson, we're going to go and do a deep dive. We're going to go into it. I want to get into it. I want to get caught up. I want this stuff to be current. Let's talk about it. So if you guys get an opportunity, if you have HBO Max or whatever it's called, if you can get it from a friend, whatever, try to catch up on it. This is episode 4. We're going to try to really dig into a deep dive on Tuesday night. It should be fun. Anybody that wants to join, throw your comments in the chat. Anybody that feels like going live, for a second or two, I might bring in somebody for a couple minutes here or there just to give their opinion and then bounce out. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. It's not really a guest type show, but at the very least, I want to get everybody's opinion in the comments and chat, and just see where everybody's at with that. See how they feel about it from this latest episode. And we'll kind of go from there. We only got a few. It's only a handful this season. Supposedly, this show is maybe going to go one more season. It could go two more. I don't look for it to go two more seasons unless they really want to change the lore and do something different. But if they decide to do one more season and speed a couple things along, that's okay. We do have another Game of Thrones spinoff show in production right now as well. So if they can do as well with that as they've done with this, then I have hope that they'll be able to really bring these worlds together. It's a shame that Game of Thrones ended the way it is, and 2 seasons of just utter garbage timeline writing and everything. But I didn't get paid several hundred thousands of dollars or $1 million to write this show, so who am I, right? However, I feel like some of the people that did should give their money back, considering how bad of a job they did. Nonetheless, the rest of this episode really does focus on the battles. There are some intercut scenes at council meetings, but truthfully, from about 25 minutes on left or so, somewhere in there, 25 minutes or so, this show actually starts to get really good. It starts to speed up. We get a lot of dragon on dragon crime. and I think that's what everybody's been looking for. That's what they've been looking forward to. Well, you're going to get it. You're definitely going to get it. So, we'll see. Hopefully next episode really keeps ramping it up and ramping it up. And as we get into next season, we get even more complicated themes and things that happen. As someone who is a non-book reader, I just love the way they've done this show and even Game of Thrones on television. Obviously up until last couple seasons last year, but overall, I think it's a wonderful job. And the budget they gave to this show, as opposed to the budget they gave to the Leslie Headland, Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant, the budget they gave for her to do her Star Wars show, The Acolyte, it is night and day the way these two shows look and how bad things that are in the background, on The Acolyte. I don't think they would use the money wisely doing this show. I really don't. If it was Lucasfilm. But with HBO, I trust them. A lot of their work is trustworthy. So I'll give them all the credit in the world until they disappoint. But anyway, so yeah, man, if you guys don't have anything to do, you want to hang out, Tuesday night and just kind of chill or whatever, talk about Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, maybe how those two interact, how they connect or whatever, then that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And any other news that pops up entertainment wise. So that'll be Tuesday at 10 Eastern, 9 Central. But anyway, so yeah, I'm excited. I hope you guys are too. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend you go back and watch House of the Dragon. Get yourself acquainted. It is a good show. It is worth watching, no matter how terrible Game of Thrones was at the very end in those last several episodes. But yeah, so just kind of prep you guys and get you ready to come back and join on Tuesday. I can't wait to go in depth with this show, and I can't wait to hear y'all's comments and what you think about it. If you're watching this on the replay, man, just like and subscribe or send me a comment or whatever you think about it. Didn't want to go too spoiler heavy tonight at all, but we'll be doing that on Tuesday, so prepare for that. In the meantime, y'all, just a short, maybe hour-long stream to tell you how excited I am about House of the Dragon this season, and can't wait for the next few episodes and see where that takes us into next season 3. So and until Tuesday, I will see y'all then. I'm Pop Blender, And this has been a quick live stream. Check you later.